My badge still worked the day everything changed. Funny how that detail sticks with me. After all the meetings, all the restructures, all the vision shifts, I still had access to the building. The elevator still opened. The security guard still nodded like it was just another Wednesday. Maybe it was. Or maybe it was the day they decided I didn't belong anymore. My name is Grant Wheeler. I'm 45. Or, as Kevin, our new CTO, once said in a room full of 20-something PMs, one of the legacy guys. I'd been at Cavestone Solutions for nearly 11 years. Long enough to see it go from scrappy code-based chaos to a 300-person operation with VC funding and a brand redesign every 6 months. And for most of that time, I wasn't just writing systems. I was holding the guts of the company together. My role didn't change much, even when the titles did. Systems architect sounded clean on paper, but in reality, I was the guy who made sure your platforms didn't collapse when marketing decided to roll out 6 tools in a quarter. I was the one who sat in the server room at 2 a.m. writing fail-safes because some executive wanted real-time sync between 3 systems that weren't built to talk. That's how Iris was born. Not because someone asked me to, because I couldn't sleep knowing the data flow was broken. I built it on nights and weekends, partly out of obsession, partly out of pride. Over time, it became the hidden core of everything Cavestone shipped. The internal sync framework that held multiple CRMs, product logs, and support pipelines together. They all used it, but no one understood it. Not really. And then came Kevin. Polished, charming, all buzzwords and confidence. He came from some startup in Austin that burned bright and died fast. Somehow that counted as visionary experience. His first week he gave a company-wide talk. I remember it vividly. Legacy systems are emotional anchors. We've got to move fast, break things, and rebuild clean. We're not optimizing, we're reimagining. The engineers clapped, some even cheered. I said nothing, because I'd heard this speech before. Different logo, same blindness. But I kept my head down. I did the work. Updated Iris to integrate with their shiny new microservices rollout. Smoothed over their GraphQL mess with translation layers they never knew existed. Documented things no one would read. And still, I was labeled rigid, unadaptable, too cautious for innovation. That was the phrase Kevin used in the meeting, the one he scheduled with HR. 8 a.m. sharp. No coffee, no eye contact. "Grant," he began, like he'd rehearsed it, "you've done a lot for this company, but your mindset doesn't really align with where we're headed." I didn't ask where they were headed. I already knew. He offered me a transition package and said I could leave that week. He even smiled like he thought he was doing me a favor. I took the folder, read it, and asked one question. Does this affect my rights to any systems I built outside my contract? Kevin blinked. What do you mean? Iris, I said plainly. I wrote it on personal time. It's not in the IP clause. You're free to rewrite it from scratch, of course. He looked at HR, confused. They looked at me, nervous. We'll have legal confirm, the woman said. Do that, I replied. Then I stood, shook hands with no warmth, and walked out of that room the same way I'd walked into the building that morning. Calm, quiet, in full control. They thought I'd be broken. They didn't realize they'd just given me back everything they thought they were taking away. The first few days felt like walking through a house I used to own. Familiar, but not mine anymore. I didn't wake up to Slack pings. Didn't check Jira tickets. Didn't reread emails at 1 a.m. trying to clean up someone else's shortcuts. I drank my coffee hot. Let it sit on the windowsill while I listened to nothing but the sound of my own thoughts. A noise I'd forgotten even existed. No goodbyes. No farewell drinks. No "you'll be missed" messages from the new kids who once came to me whispering that half the deployment was broken. I didn't need them. They never saw what I actually built. Not really. Not the long nights. Not the field-tested logic patterns. Not the guardrails I quietly wrote while others slept. What they used, what they assumed would always be there, was a system I'd started alone in a text editor at 1:46 a.m. on a Sunday in 2016 after our data lake crashed mid-sync and left 400 support tickets unanswered. That night, I wrote the first 400 lines of what became Iris. And now, Iris was still mine. Because while Cavestone happily integrated it into every team workflow, no one ever asked where the licensing stood. No one realized the original build, the core logic, lived on my personal Git, not on the company servers. The refactored versions they copied internally were old, stripped down, patched with junior dev enhancements that barely held under pressure. They'd taken my name off it, but they'd never taken ownership because I hadn't signed it away. On the 7th morning after I left, I opened that old repo, typed the same password I'd used for 6 years. It opened like an old friend. The code was tight, predictable, beautiful in its own way. Elegant loops, well-labeled fallbacks, efficient syncing with conflict resolution built for the real world, not for whiteboards. It wasn't sexy. It was bulletproof. And if they didn't want it, fine. I'd offer it to the people who did. So I spent a week cleaning it up. Not rewriting, clarifying. I built out documentation with plain language, no jargon, no over-engineered fluff. Just instructions, examples, and use cases built from real-world disasters I'd helped fix over the years. Then I added modules, Iris Core plus for raw on-premise deployments, Iris Sync Cloud for hybrid systems with cloud dependency checks, Iris EdgeLight for small teams managing multiple data silos. I renamed it all, branded it clean, Forge Sync, neutral, professional, no hint of bitterness, just stability. Exactly what 1,000 mid-sized businesses were quietly begging for while tech giants played with AI wrappers on top of unstable pipelines. Then I launched a simple website. 3 pricing tiers, monthly licensing, no lock-in, free trial with documentation and optional onboarding assistance. And I waited. Didn't run ads. Didn't flood hacker news. Didn't tweet some self-congratulatory thread about building in public. I just waited. 12 days later, I got the first notification. New subscription, Tavalink Logistics, Tier 2, license activated. I didn't recognize the name. Checked their domain. Mid-sized trucking software firm out of Minnesota. They'd signed up at full price. No questions asked. Then came another, and another, a health tech startup in Chicago, a nonprofit data firm in British Columbia, a mid-sized financial processor in Kansas City. Quiet, organic, consistent. And every new activation triggered the same thought. Cavestone was already falling behind, because while they were busy rolling out culture-first replatforming and chasing LinkedIn buzzwords, the real world, the world that ran on pipes, integrations, silent syncs that just worked, was reaching out for tools that didn't break every 6 weeks. By month 2, Forge Sync was bringing in more than my Cavestone salary. By month 4, I was hiring a support dev and a part-time technical writer to keep up with the inbound requests. And I still hadn't told a soul from my old job, because I didn't need applause. I just needed proof that I hadn't been too old, or too slow, or too rigid, just too right for the room that stopped listening. It was a Thursday when I saw the name, just after noon. I just finished helping a Tier 1 client troubleshoot a sync delay in a healthcare record merge. Routine stuff, a timestamp collision caused by a third-party scheduler misfiring across time zones. 30 minutes, 2 logs, 1 custom override, fixed. I opened my admin dashboard to log the patch, and that's when I noticed it. New registration, Trevexa, Enterprise Tier. I froze. Trevexa was a Cavestone client, one of our oldest. They handled secure data warehousing for government vendors. I'd written their original implementation plan back when they barely had a product. And now, they'd just subscribed to Forge Sync, my framework, reborn and rebranded with my code, my logic, my structure. They didn't know it was me, and yet, they'd come back to the system Cavestone had told me was obsolete. I clicked into the onboarding logs. Sure enough, the setup instructions were followed exactly. No customization request, no support ticket, because the product worked. That night, I didn't celebrate. I just stared at the monitor in the quiet. I wasn't chasing them anymore. They were coming to me. By the end of that week, Two more former Cavestone clients were on my dashboard. One was small, a boutique analytics firm out of Denver, but the other, GNS Freight Systems. They'd been one of our marquee partners, featured in slide decks, investor briefings, press releases. I'd personally managed their multi-node integration when their data volume exploded in Q2 of 2020. I remembered their CTO well, a no-nonsense woman named Arlene Shaw who didn't care about marketing fluff, only stability. She once told me, after a long whiteboarding session, "If your system doesn't fail under duress, I don't care what it's called." And now, she was back, not to Cavestone, to ForgeSync. I checked the setup notes. She'd personally signed the licensing agreement. No procurement middleman, no questions. I knew what that meant. They'd tried something else, probably Cavestone's new sync layer, the one they claimed had learned from Iris, and it had failed. So she'd gone searching for the real system and found it. A week later, my phone rang. Unknown number. San Francisco area code. I let it go to voicemail. 10 minutes later, the transcript appeared. "Hey Grant, it's Will Carver from Cavestone. Not sure if this is still your number. We were hoping to talk. Quick thing about a vendor framework some of our clients are referencing, ForgeSync. We're seeing it in more RFPs and, looks like there's some overlap with something we used to support internally. Anyway, give me a ring if you're open to chatting." I didn't respond, but I didn't delete the voicemail either. I saved it, labeled it the first crack, because that's what it was, not just curiosity, recognition. The first sign that they knew the room had shifted, and they were no longer in control of the floor. By the end of that quarter, ForgeSync was quietly powering over 40 organizations. Zero at spend, zero sales team, just structure, reliability, and trust. Exactly what I'd been told was old school. 2 months after Trevexa signed, I got the first official email. Subject: Inquiry regarding ForgeSync. Licensing tiers. From procurement@cavestonesolutions.com. No signature, no name, just a sterile, neutral question from a generic inbox. "Hello? We are evaluating ForgeSync for internal architecture planning and would appreciate further detail on scalability across hybrid deployments, particularly in high-throughput environments. Regards. Procurement team." No mention of who I was, no mention of who they were, just a firm trying to act like they were any other client. I didn't reply. Instead, I let the autoresponder kick in, a polite message directing them to the documentation portal and pricing page. 3 days later, a second email came in. This time it was signed. Eli Landers, Enterprise Solutions Director, Cavestone Solutions. I knew Eli. He was Kevin's golden boy, brought in to modernize vendor architecture after the last systems director burned out and left without notice. He never said 2 words to me when I was there. Now he was writing. "Hi, we've seen increased interest in ForgeSync among partners, and we're impressed by the clarity of the onboarding documentation. We're exploring integration options and would love to schedule a quick 20-minute call to discuss deployment scale and roadmap compatibility." Translation: We didn't build a replacement. Yours still works. Can we peek under the hood without admitting we need it? I didn't answer, not out of spite, but because they still didn't get it. This wasn't about me. It was about the system they dismissed, the principles they discarded, the process they once laughed at during meetings filled with acronyms and air. ForgeSync didn't need me to defend it. It was defending itself, one successful integration at a time. Then came the conference. I hadn't planned to attend. Never liked panels. Too much forced enthusiasm. But when the Midwest Enterprise Systems Summit announced that this year's topic was cross-platform data harmony at scale, I saw 2 things on the speaker list. Arlene Shaw, GNS Freight CTO, presenting a case study titled "Resilient Sync Without Overhead, Replacing Fragile Custom Pipelines with Plug-and-Trust Architecture." Kevin Roth, CTO, Cavestone Solutions, keynote speaker. Topic: Scaling Modern Stack Culture in a Legacy Ecosystem. I bought a ticket. No name badge. No press. I just sat in the back of the room with a legal pad and a pen. Kevin's keynote was exactly what I expected. Slides with gradients, words like momentum, velocity, modularity, screenshots of tools I'd debugged before he even joined the company. He talked about culture. He talked about sunsetting rigid mindsets. He even said, "Our new framework makes data feel like music, always in sync, always flowing." But then Arlene took the stage. She didn't use metaphors. She used numbers. In Q3, our system was averaging 16.2 hours per week of sync-related downtime. After moving to Forge Sync, that dropped to 28 minutes per week across 4 regions. The room went still. Then she showed screenshots of the dashboard. Simple, clean, mine. No vendor lock-in, no steep learning curve. It just works. And that's more valuable than any vision statement. Someone in the audience raised their hand. "Did you build that in-house?" She shook her head. "No, we licensed it, worth every cent." She never mentioned me by name. She didn't have to. After the session, I walked through the vendor floor, past booths packed with jargon and people pretending to smile for leads they wouldn't remember by Monday. And there, at the far end, I saw Cavestone's display, all white and neon, walls covered in buzzwords. Kevin was standing near a monitor, mid-pitch to a potential client. He didn't see me, but Eli did. His eyes locked on mine. Just for a second, his mouth opened, maybe to call my name, maybe to pretend he hadn't noticed. I nodded once. No smile. No malice. Just confirmation. Yes, I saw you. Yes, I heard everything. And no, we're not the same anymore. That night, I went home and opened the admin panel. 2 more new accounts. One from a fintech company I'd never worked with. Another from a Cavestone partner I had back in the Iris days. I didn't reach out, but I made a quiet note in the license tracker. Echo expanding. They'd tried to replace me with culture. Now they were paying monthly for structure, and I'd written every line. By the end of Q2, ForgeSync was embedded in 63 live environments, spanning 6 countries, 4 time zones, and at least 3 major sectors Cavestone used to claim as their strategic territories. I didn't celebrate. No champagne. No milestone tweet. Just another login, another audit, another clean sync check. Every week, new clients came in, quietly, organically, through referrals, case studies, or whispered conversations that started with, "What are you using for data integrity now?" I started recognizing the pattern. The same sequence every time. A company struggles with their internal integration. They ask their vendor, usually Cavestone, for support. They're told to wait for the next rollout. They get tired. They find ForgeSync. They stay. That's it. No drama, no promises. Just a product that kept its word. And then it happened. I got an email that didn't come from procurement. Didn't come from some quiet engineer. Didn't come through the website. It came directly from Kevin Roth. Subject line: private discussion. Request: your time appreciated. Grant. I hope this message finds you well. I've been watching ForgeSync's growth with real interest. You've clearly built something impactful. I wonder if we might set up a call. Off the record. Just the 2 of us. There are changes happening internally, and I think there's a path forward where both parties benefit. Respectfully, Kevin Roth, Chief Technology Officer, Cavestone Solutions. I read the email twice. He didn't say it directly, but I could feel it between the lines. They were losing ground. Worse, their own clients were starting to publicly reference ForgeSync in case studies, procurement briefs, and RFPs. There were now whispers that Cavestone had lagging architecture, that their internal tools were overly dependent on patched legacy logic. I didn't answer Kevin's email that day. Instead, I opened the back-end logs and ran a scan. 3 Cavestone clients, all Tier 1 licensees, were now operating fully on ForgeSync. One had recently migrated their reporting engine with 0 issues. Another had disabled Cavestone's native sync layer entirely. They were still pretending nothing had changed, but I could see the inside of the machine now. Later that week, I got a message from someone I hadn't spoken to in over 2 years. Dana Serrano, former lead solutions analyst at Cavestone. One of the few who actually respected the technical stack, who stayed late, asked real questions, and once said to me, "You design like someone who hates making apologies." She'd left 6 months after I did. Now she was a senior architect at a growing fintech firm in Boston. Grant, just wanted you to know. Your system saved us this week. Multi-region conflict was resolved in under a minute. My new team was stunned. P.S. I knew Iris wasn't obsolete. They just weren't smart enough to ask how it actually worked. I leaned back in my chair and exhaled slowly. I didn't need validation, but I felt something shift. Not pride. Peace. Because this wasn't about proving Kevin wrong. It wasn't about gloating. It was about building something that lasted. Not because I fought for attention, but because I built for truth. And now the people who once pushed me out were quietly paying me. Monthly. Automatically. Via a system they still pretended not to recognize by name. I never replied to Kevin's email, but a week later I got another. This time it came from Cavestone's legal department. We are exploring options for framework standardization and potential licensing alignment. Can you provide information regarding ForgeSync's long-term roadmap and support commitments? This is not a legal notice, simply a request for clarity. I read that line 3 times. This is not a legal notice, which meant they'd already asked themselves that question internally. Do we have any legal ground here? They didn't. I had documentation, timestamps, personal repos, unassigned IP, a paper trail going back 5 years. They had nothing. Because when you're too busy chasing momentum, you forget to read the fine print on your foundation. And I'd been the one who built that foundation and walked away without ever burning it down. Now they were crawling back across it, in silence. By midsummer, Cavestone's silence was louder than any press release. They hadn't gone public about ForgeSync, hadn't mentioned it in earnings calls, hadn't acknowledged a single client departure. But I could see the tremors under the surface. One morning, I opened my license metrics dashboard and noticed something new. 6 clients had expanded their plans. 2 had signed multi-year agreements. And 1 had added 3 additional ForgeSync nodes, all routed through a Cavestone-managed back-end. In other words, Cavestone was now dependent on my infrastructure. I didn't leak it, didn't post a screenshot, didn't call a journalist. I just watched, because sooner or later they'd stop pretending. And when they did, they'd have to come through me. The call finally came on a Tuesday. Blocked number. No calendar invite. No pleasantries. Just a flat voice on the other end. Mr. Wheeler, this is Olivia Trent, Cavestone's general counsel. I'd like to speak to you privately regarding ForgeSync. May I ask if this is a good time? I glanced at the time, 9:01 a.m. Right on schedule. Go ahead, I said. She spoke with careful cadence, like every word had been screened by 3 PR firms and a risk consultant. We've been monitoring ForgeSync's expansion across several verticals, and its technical structure appears to mirror systems previously developed at Cavestone. There is concern, I'll stress, internal concern, that some elements may derive from proprietary frameworks used during your time with the company. I let the silence linger. Then I answered flatly. Iris was never assigned IP. I built the original framework independently outside Cavestone's contract hours. Your legal team knows that, or they would have already sent a cease and desist. She paused. We're not looking for confrontation. We're exploring options, specifically acquisition. There it was. The pivot. I didn't speak for a few seconds, because this was the moment I'd waited for. Not out of vengeance, but confirmation. Not only had they failed to replace what I'd built, now they wanted to buy it back. I leaned back in my chair. I'm listening, I said. Over the next few days, things moved fast. Their first offer came through unofficial channels. A clean, quiet buyout, low 8 figures, full IP transfer, no public announcement. I declined without countering. Not because of the number, because of the terms. They wanted to erase the system and the story. That was the whole point. To fold ForgeSync into their stack and pretend it had always been theirs. To retroactively rewrite the narrative in which I had been let go for being out of touch. I had no interest in giving them that satisfaction. But I wasn't petty. I was prepared. So I offered another path. Not a buyout. A licensing deal. Non-exclusive. Market rate. Quarterly review. No white labeling. Public acknowledgement required in all RFP responses where ForgeSync was deployed. At first, they balked, said it was unorthodox, said it would confuse their clients. But I held the line because their clients were already using my system, and they were only confused because Cavestone was still pretending to be the architect. Eventually, they relented. The signed agreement arrived on a Friday morning. I reviewed every clause, tightened the language, inserted an annual renewal clause tied to performance benchmarks. Then I signed it, digitally, silently, and archived it under a folder labeled Structural Justice. That night, I opened the ForgeSync admin panel and created a new user role, Cavestone_ops_01, access, read-only, scope Tier 2 license, visibility, full telemetry tracking enabled. I clicked Create. No fanfare, no announcement, just another system, another structure, now accountable to me. After the licensing deal was signed, the silence from Cavestone became different. Not the silence of denial, the silence of someone trying not to draw attention to the person they now reported to, at least in part. Their marketing materials quietly removed all mentions of their proprietary sync engine. The keynote slides were updated. Their sales engineers began referring to integration layers as vendor-managed. One internal deck, which leaked anonymously on a niche systems architecture forum, referred to ForgeSync simply as External Tier Supervised Logic Core, ETSLC. They couldn't even write the name, but every first of the month the payment cleared. Every quarter, my dashboard showed active user telemetry from Cavestone-linked endpoints. Every time I pushed a new module, security patches, performance upgrades, scaling optimizations, they were first in the queue to pull it. It wasn't dominance, it was gravity. They were now orbiting a structure they didn't build, couldn't replicate, and had once confidently discarded. But the real shift came 6 weeks later. I got a message from a friend, an investor I knew from back when Cavestone was still pitching its Series B. He sent me a link, a pre-release version of Cavestone's upcoming investor report. Thought you'd want to see how they're framing things internally, he said. Pay attention to page 12. I opened the PDF. There it was, Platform Stability Update. Following our Q1 architecture audit, we've streamlined operations through a third-party sync framework that now supports a majority of our enterprise deployments. This external tool has improved uptime by 37%, reduced support ticket load by 42%, and allowed us to reallocate DevE cycles toward innovation initiatives. I read it twice. No name, no attribution. But the numbers were mine. The structure was mine. The impact, undeniably, was mine. They couldn't say it out loud, but they'd been forced to tell the truth in code. Then came the phone call I never expected. Not from legal, not from Kevin, from Jennifer Lai, head of compliance at one of Cavestone's largest remaining clients, a multinational utilities company. We hadn't spoken in over 3 years. Grant, she said after confirming it was me, I know this is unexpected, but I need to ask, are you still directly overseeing ForgeSync compliance integrity? I am, I said. She paused. We're reviewing Cavestone's new deployment structure, and it's clear their system stability now relies entirely on your framework. That's not a problem. We trust it. But we want to verify something. Go ahead. Who actually owns the system? Who sets roadmap priorities? I smiled. Me. Another pause. Then, in that case, we'd prefer to contract with you directly next cycle. No offense to Cavestone, but I'd rather go to the source. That was the moment it all crystallized. The shift wasn't just structural. It was philosophical. The trust Cavestone once owned by default was now earned by me through architecture, reliability, and quiet proof. And their biggest clients were beginning to see it. Not because I told them. Not because I chased them. Because the system told the truth they couldn't. By Q4, 5 of Cavestone's top 15 clients had renegotiated contracts to license ForgeSync independently, bypassing Cavestone altogether for key infrastructure. And Kevin? He hadn't emailed again. But someone forwarded me a copy of an internal Slack message he'd posted to their systems team. We need a long-term plan for sync independence. This can't be permanent. It was already permanent. Because they didn't just outsource a tool, they outsourced the soul of their system. And that doesn't come back with version numbers. It happened quietly. The kind of thing most people would miss unless they were watching very, very closely. Cavestone Series D collapsed. Not because they ran out of money, because they ran out of confidence. The investment memo leaked before the board could contain it. One paragraph said everything. Core product stability is overly reliant on external infrastructure, not under Cavestone's control. Attempts to replace this dependency have failed internally and were not cost-effective. Recommendation: reassess strategic roadmap or consider asset sale. I didn't comment, didn't post, didn't reply to the 5 reporters who reached out, but that night I added a sticky note to the edge of my monitor. Build so well they can't replace you, and make it easy for them to realize it too late. A month later, I sat in a small glass meeting room on the 19th floor of a neutral co-working space in Chicago. Across the table, Jennifer Lai, her deputy CTO, and 2 legal reps. She slid the papers over to me. Forge Sync as primary infrastructure provider, 5-year term, full-stack integration, roadmap participation clause optional. I scanned the document. Clean, clear, fair. They weren't hiring me. They were partnering with me. And Cavestone? Not even on the short list. Jennifer said without irony, "You've built the only system that doesn't lie to us. That's not something you abandon for branding." I signed. No handshake speech. No celebratory grin. Just ink, structure, continuity. That evening, I stopped by a quiet cafe and opened my laptop like I had 100 times before. Logged into the Forge Sync admin dashboard. Numbers rising. Deployment scaling. Support tickets low. And at the very bottom of the page, a single line that made me pause. Active Cavestone-linked systems, 17. They were still here, still paying, still running, still pretending. That's the difference between a culture and a structure. Culture tries to tell a story. Structure doesn't need to. It simply endures. A week later, I got a letter. Physical envelope, no return address. Inside, a single sheet of paper. Typed, precise. You were right. We were too proud to listen, too eager to replace something we didn't understand. I don't expect a reply, just build well. Kevin. I didn't frame it, didn't burn it either. I folded it once and put it in a drawer, right next to the original printout of the Iris prototype spec I'd written in 2016. From the same hands, but from 2 different worlds. Today, ForgeSync powers over 120 organizations across 9 countries. I work with a team of 10, all former engineers, analysts, and architects who got pushed out of places that valued slogans over substance. We don't do slogans, we do systems. And every time someone asks where ForgeSync came from, I say the same thing. It started as a quiet refusal. To accept that quality had an expiration date. To believe that experience was a liability. To let short-sighted culture overwrite long-term structure. Because I wasn't too old school. I was just early. And now, they pay for that clarity. Every single month. Without a word. Without a choice. Without a system of their own.